A black veteran's widow confronted Barron Trump in front of a crowded town hall, her voice trembling with frustration and years of unanswered questions. What happened next stunned everyone in the room. Barron Trump stood at the edge of the crowded community hall, his tall, poised figure leaning lightly against a pillar near the back. The room felt alive with tension, voices overlapping in waves of frustration and discontent. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting a pale, sterile glow on the gathering. Rows of folding chairs creaked as attendees shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mix of weariness and muted anger. At the heart of the room, Claire Reynolds stood, her presence like a spark in a dry forest. She was in her late 30s, but carried the weight of someone far older. Her dark brown hair, pulled into a loose ponytail, framed a face etched with lines of exhaustion and determination. Clad in a simple blouse and jeans that had seen better days, she clutched a worn leather bag to her side, her knuckles white from the grip. "How many more times do I have to come here?" she demanded, her voice sharp and cutting through the low hum of the room. "How many more forms do I have to fill out before someone, anyone, actually does their job?" Her words hung in the air like a challenge, her brown eyes blazing as they scanned the panel of officials seated at the front. Behind them, a banner reading "Community Support for Veterans Families" seemed like a cruel irony. "My husband gave everything for this country," Claire continued, her voice cracking just slightly. "And now I'm standing here begging for scraps while the system, your system, treats me like I don't matter, like he didn't matter." Her voice broke entirely on the last word, but she quickly swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to fight. The officials shifted uncomfortably behind their table. Their polished suits and carefully rehearsed expressions gave little away, but their unease was evident. One of them, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward and adjusted the microphone. "We understand your frustration, Mrs. Reynolds," he began, his tone measured and bureaucratic. "Cases like yours are incredibly important to us, and we are working diligently to expedite them." "Working?" Claire cut him off with a bitter laugh, the sound sharp enough to make a few heads turn. "You've been working on this for 3 years. Meanwhile, I've sold everything I can just to keep my kids fed and a roof over our heads. Do you have any idea what that's like?" The crowd murmured uneasily, some nodding in agreement, others averting their eyes. A few people clapped softly, but the applause fizzled almost as soon as it began. Barron's gaze never wavered. He watched Claire intently, his expression unreadable yet focused. He had heard stories like hers before, but something about her, her raw, unfiltered honesty, compelled him to act. Slowly, he straightened and began walking toward the front of the room. His steps were unhurried, yet purposeful, each one drawing more eyes to him. The crowd parted instinctively, whispers rippling as they recognized who he was. Claire, too consumed by her anger, didn't notice him at first. It wasn't until he stopped a few feet away from her that she turned, her tear-streaked face meeting his calm, composed gaze. "I'm sorry," Barron said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the murmurs like a blade through fog. Claire blinked, caught off guard. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. "I'm sorry for what you've been through," he continued, his tone sincere and unhurried. "And I'm sorry that no one here has done enough to make it right." The room fell silent. Even the officials behind the table looked stunned, their rehearsed facades slipping momentarily. Claire frowned, her defenses still up. "What do you know about it?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but no less sharp. "You've probably never had to fight for anything in your life." Barron didn't flinch. "You're right," he said simply. "I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes, but that doesn't mean I can't try to help." Something in his tone, unshakable, yet not patronizing, made her pause. The fire in her eyes dimmed just slightly, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. Barron turned to the officials, his calm demeanor now edged with quiet authority. His gaze settled on the man with the glasses, who squirmed under the weight of it. "She shouldn't have to wait another day," Barron said. His voice was even, but the steel in it was unmistakable. "Whatever red tape is holding up her case, cut through it. Today." The official stammered, his polished confidence unraveling. We're doing everything we can. Do better, Barron interrupted, his tone as unyielding as stone. She's not asking for a favor, she's asking for what she's owed. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. For the first time, the atmosphere in the room shifted, anger giving way to something softer, more hopeful. Barron turned back to Claire. His gaze softened, and for a moment, the weight of the room seemed to fade. It was just the two of them. I can't fix everything, he said gently, but I can promise you this. I'll make sure they follow through. And if they don't... He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek business card, and held it out to her. You come find me. Claire hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly as she took the card. She stared at it for a moment before looking back at him. Why do you care? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to hold a deeper intensity. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply, and because people like you shouldn't have to fight this hard just to be heard. Claire's lips parted again, but no words came. Instead, a single tear rolled down her cheek, and she nodded. Thank you, she said finally, her voice breaking on the words. Barron gave her a small, respectful nod and stepped back, melting into the crowd once more. The room, now quiet and contemplative, seemed to breathe in unison as the weight of what had just transpired settled over everyone. For the first time in years, Claire felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. This isn't the only time Barron Trump has stepped up to help someone in need. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about his quiet acts of kindness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to share. Stay tuned.